Welcome to Securing Things by Mohammad Yousuf Faisal. This session is titled Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity Strategy, drawing parallels between both strategies and covering at a high level steps for both the journeys. Many industrial organizations still struggle with starting out on defining and or executing their digital transformation and or cybersecurity strategies and their maturity. And yes, both journeys have completely different focus and the goal. One that would drive innovation for production operations to help produce more with less and predict failures and provide state of production operations in real time accurately. And the other that could potentially ensure that operation stays resilient to cyber threats and consequently avoid any production loss or downtime respectively. But there are solutions to both these problems, and help is available out in the market. If you are in this situation, your manufacturing environment is most probably at risk, both at getting crushed by the competition and or getting penetrated by the adversaries. Whether you are a CIO, CISO, OT automation expert, or part of operations senior leadership team and have recognized the crucial importance of having both these strategies in place, please act now and raise the required capital and awareness internally. Though these two strategies, as I mentioned, have totally different focus, goals, required skill sets, organizational alignment, and investment and support needs are different. However, they have some commonalities in terms of the approach and the execution. And if we talk about industrial automation stack, we have six levels of automation stack, starting from cloud and ERP, both sits and controlled by the IT organization. Then you have MES, SCADA, HMI, PLC, and your physical layer, mostly controlled by OTT. A quick reminder in terms of para or Purdue model, the cloud layer is at level 5, ERP is level 4, MES is level 3, SCADA is level 2. Then you have both HMI and PLC, which is at level 1 of the Purdue model. This is where and then you have the physical layer where you have sensors, actuators, and whatnot, and related physical processes. So from a Purdue model perspective, that's level 0. In between your ERP and MES, there's probably an IDMZ or industrial DMZ or OT DMZ that you may have defined. Some organization I still see haven't defined this middle layer to segregate IT and OT traffic, but it's highly recommended as a best practice for you to consider. And in the secure network architecture session, we are going to deep dive on that, on the reasons why you need that segregation. Digital transformation from an industry 4.0 perspective is not a project, rather a strategy or a journey. Similarly, defining IT and OT cybersecurity and achieving maturity is also a journey and not a project. It's a continuous iteration of ensuring strategy is aligned together to the dynamic and constantly evolving or changing needs of the business. While cybersecurity needs to be an integral part of overall digital transformation strategy for any critical infrastructure and or manufacturing business, it is important to understand that it's not limited to the digital transformation strategy alone, but is applicable to the entire business operations that is beyond the DT initiatives. Any digital transformation initiative ignoring the importance or need of cybersecurity are going to increase cyber risk to the operation and could potentially create a major issue or hurdle for a long-term strategy execution and can turn out to be costly for the business. DT is one of the key drivers for many businesses initiating their cybersecurity program. As far as my personal experience goes in the field, I have seen that many organizations, once they have transformed their industrial operations from 3.0 to 4.0, they're going through that transformation process. Any new incidents, events occurring, probably some attacks as well, that's where they turn towards initiating a cybersecurity strategy or a program. That it's too late. Digital transformation is, as I mentioned, is one of the key drivers for highlighting this um, cybersecurity strategy. It might be led by your chief digital officer for a larger organization. That's new kind of a title. In short, you call it CTO. It might be the digital transformation director. Maybe your CIO is leading these initiatives within the organization who have experience working on both the IT and OT side of the fence, bringing industrial automation background and the knowledge, and has led different industrial operations and transformed their processes from 3.0 to 4.0. And then you have also the cybersecurity team, which might be led by your CISO organization in the mix. They both needs to understand the key tenets of a typical strategy or a journey, respectively. Make sure they do not approach either of these strategies as a single project where you are going to start and finish, then that's it. Each team needs to plan on embarking on these journeys and should have common understanding of the key goals they both have to meet their business goals and objectives. Though we are drawing parallels, it is essential to understand that goals and objectives for both strategies are completely different. But at a high level, as an example, if we talk about the steps involved in each of these journeys, both teams may initiate or draw parallels from each other to support each other's strategic objectives rather than being in conflict of each other. Both programs need to cover the areas of the automation stack as we highlighted earlier. Both teams may initiate and support each other's strategic objectives um, by collaborating with each other on these programs. So now if we talk about first how digital transformation from an industrial organization that could potentially succeed would look like, what are those steps? Then the first step is to perform or conduct digital transformation maturity assessment or DTMA exercise to identify the current maturity level of the organization. This process starts with building a business inventory across all layers of your automation stack, both in IT and OT side. Ideally suited to be done by Industry 4.0 architects that have experience running such projects. So it's usually a third party system integrator and 4.0 expert. It's not commonly your internal resource in most cases, what I've seen. The next step is for you to identify and appoint the owner who's going to run this digital transformation strategy for your business. It's typically for mature organization, as I mentioned earlier, the chief digital officer or the CDO role, who is responsible for drafting this strategy. Both IT and automation teams would report into this new role as a new structure. That's how many major corporations have succeeded in their 4.0 initiatives and have structured their team. So, something to consider if you are embarking on such a journey. Once you have appointed this role, the first thing the CDO needs to do is define and document that strategy. Perhaps a one pager, two pager, three pager, whatever that may be, depending on the culture and digital literacy of your organization. Define and write a strategy on what do you want to achieve as a business from your cybersecurity program initiatives. Once that is defined, then you define minimum technical requirements. A way you define those minimum technical requirements would be that you define it that it needs to be technology driven rather than solution driven. We'll talk about the differences between the two when we go deeper in later sessions. But just for the time being, understand that when we are defining these minimum technical requirements, you should define that it should be open architecture. It should be technology should be based on open architecture. It should have report by exception. It should be bandwidth friendly, and so on. Once these minimum technical requirements are defined, hopefully this will help you avoid vendor lock-ins, and you make sure that the next step is you define a 4.0 reference reference architecture for your environment in which you are going to build this digital transformation initiative and then expand upon that architecture. So just remember that for each sub project within your digital transformation journey or a defined goal, you need to treat that project as part of a bigger digitally connected ecosystem. You must use agile methods to create some sort of a centrally consolidated, unified logical namespace for your business, and you run it through with some proof of concept. So you identify a business problem first, and then you, as a proof of concept, try to solve that business problem. You may maybe want to use ISA 95 Part 2 as your logical namespace hierarchy. Treat every project as part of bigger digital connected ecosystem, as I mentioned. Innovate using agile methodology and create this unique namespace for each production site. And then you move on from solving one problem to the next, and so on. And you innovate and transform your business that way. Similarly, if we talk about ITOT cybersecurity program journey now, it's not a project, it's strategy, as I mentioned. To give you some more context, we are going to highlight some key steps. And in an ideal scenario, the journey starts similar to the transformation exercise, where we did the maturity assessment. So we are going to start with some sort of a discovery or maturity assessment exercise. The first step in this exercise, just like the digital transformation maturity assessment, is to build a business or asset inventory across each facility at your perhaps group level, both on your IT tech stack and your OT technology stack at each layer of this automation, six layer of automation stack, and understand what needs to be protected across the whole stack itself. Now, once you have done your discovery work, you have identified potential improvement initiatives or gaps that you may need to address. Maybe you're missing certain security solutions or control. So you have some sort of a basic roadmap in place. This is also usually directly done by a third party. If you have relevant expertise internally with that person who has performed these exercises, then well and good. But you probably want to have an independent view, especially if you're doing it for the first time. So the next step is for you to then identify OT cybersecurity program lead or a director or a CISO, just like your point CDO for your transformation in strategy. You want to identify the right person who's going to drive this program strategy and its execution. The first thing that program lead needs to do, whether internally done or externally sourced, needs to define a ITOT cybersecurity strategy and probably select some sort of an industry best practice framework that you may want to use in longer run. Maybe factoring in some relevant regulations that you need to comply with from a your industry perspective. So once the strategy and framework is selected and things are in place, then you probably want to identify some governance structure within your environment, a joint ITOT or governance team, which is going to work together and it's going to help you break some silos, hopefully. Then you define your OT security policy as a next step. And just like minimum technical requirements in the digital strategy, you are going to define ITOT cybersecurity requirements as specification, certain principle around do's and don'ts that you want to establish as part of the overall ITOT project lifecycle, and embed those requirements into respective lifecycle stages. Similarly, the next step is defining these requirements and policies. You define a secure reference network architecture, which is Industry 4.0 IIoT ready, and so on. So based on these standard requirements, architectural principle threats that you have identified earlier, you build and conduct some sort of an ITOT cybersecurity awareness program as a next step within the organization and bring everybody at a common level of understanding, hopefully. Once you have done all above, then we will go about and performing certain evaluations of technical security control gaps that you want to fix. which requires specialized solution that you need to implement within your environment, whether it's specialized OT or IT cybersecurity solution at different layers of the automation stack. Then what you need to do is implement that from a visibility, remote access, access control, network segregation, firewall, and other control selection and implementation perspective. Later, you're going to perform ongoing cybersecurity monitoring, perhaps testing and measuring the effectiveness of the entire program throughout the project lifecycle. And we'll talk about the rest of the journey in later session, but at least this should give you some parallels between the two. So, in conclusion, if you are embarking on such a journey, whether whereby both teams are starting certain initiatives in these two areas, it's always good to work as a single virtually integrated business unit or a team to avoid any repetitive task. For example, I highlighted conducting discovery on the business inventory and perhaps save some time and effort and cost and potentially overlapping activities. That's why if you have a CDO organization and then your CISO is part of that organization, then I've seen that it might work well. Some people might still argue that okay, it needs to be CISO needs to be an independent organization, and it's all good, and it all depends on the size of your organization, the culture, the structure of the business, the geographical location, and many other factors. So businesses that are planning for such an expansion, let's say for example, planning on doing certain greenfield projects or new implementation, they are in a perfect position to define and align and execute both these strategies. That's the perfect time. So don't miss the boat if you are just starting out. Now, on the contrary, if we talk about businesses planning for or either going through mergers and acquisitions within the industrial space, for newly acquired businesses, they may present higher risk levels with lower maturity in these areas, in both these strategy areas, which will turn the overall organization maturity and perhaps the compliance state can be impacted and can potentially cause negative consequences to the acquiring business. It may also require reorganization of these two teams, because when you integrate and merge these businesses, that's typically what happens. Therefore, it's highly critical that the acquisition party, as part of the due diligence process, considers reviewing the maturity around these two strategies and identify cyber risk, and also potentially presents these as a opportunity to leverage the findings to better negotiate the right deal. So I hope this has been informative, and we'll conclude this section here and more details to follow in the future videos. Thank you very much. Take care, and it's a great day to start securing things.